আমি বলবো 15 আপনি বলবেন ঠিক আছে আমি কি বলবো কেন খালি দেখাবেন আপনি
Namaste. On behalf of Delhi Craft Council, a very warm welcome to everyone present here today. Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay was a person of many parts. She was a freedom fighter, social activist, actor, politician, all rolled into one. But above everything, she is remembered for her phenomenal role in reviving the traditional handicrafts of India during the post-independence era. The idea behind this exhibition was to bring back her presence for the next generation by people who have learned, loved, and celebrated Kamla Devi Ji. The exhibition is a result of several months of in-depth research, during which many archives were explored both in India and abroad. This exploration has led to an extraordinary wealth of information revealing Kamla Devi Ji's depth and effective participation in the Indian freedom struggle. There have been a number of people who have worked tirelessly to put this exhibition together. Devaki ji, Kapila ji, Aparna ji, Annie, the program team of IIC, Birad, Agnik for curating this exhibition. A big thank you. Our first session, Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, the activist. Our first speaker is Dr. Aparna Basu. Aparna ji was a professor of history at the Delhi University. She is the UGC convener of the National Subject Panel of History and Archaeology. She is the author of several books, including Growth of Education and Political Development in Indian Women's Struggle, A History of All India Women's Conference, Rebel with a Cause, Biography of Mridula Sarabhai, From Independence to Freedom, Women and 50 Years of India's Independence, and a history of Delhi University on the occasion of its Platinum Jubilee. She is on the editorial advisory board of Gender and History, Indian Economic and Social History Review, Indian Journal of Gender Studies, and Women's History.
All yours. Okay. No. Thank you very much. I'm very honored that I've been asked to speak today. There are many in this room who probably knew and worked with Kamla Devi and knew her much more intimately than I did. I must confess that I met her towards the end of her life in IIC. And when I was writing my biography of Mridula Sarabhai, I went to interview her, but she was not very forthcoming. I couldn't get much out of her. So my association with her was really very brief. I heard of her just once more. I know I have to speak only for 15 minutes, so I'll be brief. Heard of her, she and my father traveled on the same boat to England in 1921 when my father was going to LSE and Kamla Devi was going to join Harendranath in England. Harendranath was already her husband was already in Cambridge and Kamla Devi was following. He had actually escaped without probably telling her even that he was going. And she was following him and they were both vegetarians. So they were put on the same table. So my father and she became good friends on the boat because they ate together. And of course my father was very impressed because he had never met a young woman who was so outspoken and free in her conversation and so on. So he used to talk about her. And a couple of times in Bombay, when she was with her son Ram, we had dinner with her. But my association with her was not really that intimate as some of Jasleen and Gulshan and all worked with her. Now, it is difficult to cover a multifaceted life that was as rich as that of Kamla Devi in 15 minutes or so. She has written about herself. There is her autobiography, Inner Recesses and Outer Space. She has written about women in the freedom struggle, several other books, articles, and so on. Good biographies have written about her. I must say something because Dr. Ram Guha is here. First of all, it's a great honor. I should not have been speaking here. He should have been speaking here. We invited him and he said he was very busy and he couldn't come. But we are very, very happy, Ram, that you are with us. And he was one of the first persons who really made me aware that what a remarkable role Kamala Devi played in the making of modern India. I must confess I hadn't realized that. But he did, some years ago, a little TV a documentary, what shall I call it, on the makers of modern India, in which, if I'm not mistaken, there were only two women, Mridula Sarabhai, about whom I've written, and Kamala Devi, who are not so well known, but who he felt had played a very distinct role. And then, a couple of years ago, IIC had a workshop on women leadership, emphasizing unknown women leaders, and they asked me to speak on Kamala Devi. That is really what put me on to reading about her, and I realized that what a remarkable woman she was, because I associated in my mind more with her with handicrafts and textiles and so on, cottage industries, emporium and so on. But the other, of course, I knew about her in AIWC, but I found out. Now, those of you who are not familiar with Kamala Devi's life, just little bit. She was a child widow in Mangalore, but she refused to conform to any of the restrictions of a young widow. She and her mother moved to Madras. She educated herself there. She studied in a school. She studied in a college there. And one of Sarojini Naidu's sisters was a teacher in that college. And she introduced her to Sarojini Naidu's father, Aghareronath Chattopadhyay, used to have he was a doctor in Hyderabad, and they had a kind of, every evening a soiree where people would come and recite poems and sing songs and act plays and so on. Kamala Devi went there and was fascinated by this. She was a very beautiful girl, and Harendranath was there, and he used to sing and act and so on, and she got involved there. They fell in love, and she wanted to marry. Of course, that was the second big barrier. First, to be a child widow and, not observe any customs. Second, a widow wanting to remarry. And this was, the widow remarriage bill was passed when? 1859. And this is much later. And she was hardly, even in the late teens. But she wanted to marry, and she married him. And then they both of them acted in various, she was very fond of acting, and Harendranath had a little repertoire, and she used to act in plays and all that with him. Then he went, as I said, he went off to England. She followed him, and she studied at Bedford College in London, and she studied social work. She was told by the principal, you can't wear a sari and go to the slums of London. She said, I won't wear anything else. And she wore a sari, and she went into the slums of East London and, worked among the workers and the poor people there. Came back, but when she was there, the non-cooperation movement started. Gandhiji's non-cooperation movement started. She was very drawn to it. She came back to India, and she joined the Hindustan Seva Dal, which was the Congress wing, for women. She joined that. She volunteered, and she worked there. It was a tough life. I mean, she had expected it to be romantic and so on, but a volunteer was tough. She had thought she would meet Gandhiji. She didn't get a chance, but anyway, she was there. In Madras, there was the Women's Indian Association, founded by Annie Besant, Margaret Cousins, and Dorothy Jinnah. Three Theosophist women, ex-suffragettes, who were working for women, and they had started the Women's Indian Association, asking for votes for women when the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms were being discussed. And after a great deal of debate and discussion and so on, finally the British government agreed to give votes for women, also the right for women to stand for election. And Kamala Devi was the first woman to stand for election in India. Margaret Cousins persuaded her, and that you stand as an independent candidate from Bangalore for the Madras Assembly. She stood, and she had a group of volunteers working for her who were known as the Blue Lotus Brigade. And they did campaign for her, but unfortunately she joined the movement, the election campaign late, and she lost, but by a very narrow margin, about 55 votes. She lost the election. But Margaret Cousins didn't want her to give up her public life. I mean, this was not the end of it. And she was planning a conference for women. The Women's Indian Association was only for votes, but she wanted something more, particularly for education for women. And so she had the idea of having an All India Women's Education Conference in Pune in 1927. And she dragged Kamala Devi to that conference and said, come along with me. Kamala Devi went there. The conference was a resounding success, much more than they'd expected. About 2,000 women from all over India turned up, from Bengal, from South India, from Punjab, Gujarat, all over. And of course, Pune in those days was a great center of social reform. So they had a very successful conference, and they decided that this would now become a permanent body, which is today the All India Women's Conference. So people say, why is it called a conference? It's not a conference, it's a proper organization. We have here today the past president of the All India Women's Conference, the current Secretary General, Treasurer, they are all present here today, because I said that you have to be here, because this is Kamala Devi was very closely associated with the founding of the All India Women's Conference. Sarojini Naidu made her the first organizing secretary. I think Margaret Cousins was behind that also. And Kamala Devi did a lot of work. She had no assistance. She says, I was a clerk, I was a peon, I was a secretary. She got herself a little typewriter and started traveling all around India, starting branches everywhere. And she wanted the whole thing to go beyond education. That was the time when the child marriage bill was being discussed, what came to be known as the Sarda Act. And she did a lot of propaganda for that. She came to Delhi. They had little groups, and they approached different members of the Legislative Assembly. Like Kamala Devi went to Motilal Nehru and told Motilal Nehru, you have to get this bill passed. Kamala Devi was only 25, and Motilal Nehru looked at her and said, you chit of a girl, what do you know about all this? And she said, well, if you want, I'll produce older women to convince you. And she argued with him, and he was so impressed that he said, you come to Anand Bhavan and meet the rest of my family. That's how she got an introduction to the Nehru family also. Well, that was sort of Kamala Devi's association. Oh, she was very interested in education. And that is why she was one of the founders of the Lady Irwin College, because she felt that women should have, home science and nutrition and learning. All this was very important for girls. And it was during her secretaryship of the All India Women's Conference that Lady Irwin College, which still exists today, was started. Then came the salt satyagraha. And somehow Kamala Devi moved slowly from her interest in women into her interest in the freedom struggle. And Gandhiji in the original thing had not included women. 79 men were going from Ahmedabad to Dandi for the salt satyagraha. Kamala Devi and some other women, they wanted very much women to be included. So Kamala Devi wrote to Gandhiji that, why have you not included women? And then she thought that he was not replying. So she went to Surat, and from Surat to Jambusar, where Gandhiji was, and said, please include women in this. He said, let them come. I have not stopped them. She said, no, that won't do. There must be a clear message from you that women... So after a great deal of persuasion, Gandhiji said, all right, here is a scrap of paper, you can take it. I have no objection to women joining the satyagraha. And so she immediately publicized this all over, that women could join the satyagraha. And she became very active. And it was really in Bombay was a field of activity. She was in Bombay, and the women marched. There was, I think, 6th of April, which was the Jallianwala Bagh Day. About thousands of women. Kamala Devi led a procession. They went to Chowpatty in Bombay with earthen pitchers and brass pots on their head to Chowpatty to manufacture salt. It was apparently an absolutely amazing sight. All these women went there, and she writes how they picked up salt from the sea, and they had little fire below the pitchers, so that the water would evaporate and salt would come out of it, you see. And the police came and the lathi charge, she fell down, and the policeman said, shall I take you to a hospital? And she said, no, I don't need any help. But Kapilaji is not here, but Kapilaji's mother was also part of this. She always recounts this, how she was also part of this whole march into Chowpatty. And then she carried on this activity, and this salt satyagraha continued. She was put in jail. 9 months she was imprisoned, and altogether between 1930 and 1945, I think that she spent about 5 to 6 years in jail. Out of that, about 9 months in solitary confinement, which was a very bad experience, I mean, very tough experience for her, about which she writes also about her times there. Then she started selling salt also on that. If you look at the issues of Bombay Chronicle and the Times of India and so on, of these 1930, 31, 32, like that, Kamala Devi appears a lot almost in the newspapers who tell us about her activities there. And she even, when she was being sentenced, she went to when she was put into magistrate's court, she told the magistrate, why are you serving the British government? You resign. And he said, no, I'm not going to resign. They also went into the court to sell this contraband salt and were, of course, driven out. Now, so she became in the process both a leader in the women's movement as well as in the freedom struggle. Not all congressmen approved of her, and she had many differences with Gandhiji, with Nehru, with Sardar Patel. She wrote to them, she offended them, she argued with them. So she was not a kind of, in the Congress there were many women who were, how shall I put it, were there as kind of tokens who went along with whatever the Congress High Command said. She was not one of them. She disagreed with them very often. And that is why in 1936, when the Congress Working Committee was formed, she was almost promised that she would be made a member of the Working Committee, and she was not. Nehru blamed Gandhi, Gandhiji blamed Nehru, so we don't know who was responsible. But they thought she was too outspoken, too independent, and to be there. Her last sort of entry into politics was her effort in 1952. She stood for the first election that independent India had from Bombay, not as a Congress candidate, very sad to say, independent. Bombay Congress did not support her, and she lost the election. I mean, this is the second time that she lost the election. She doesn't write much about that, but I'm sure that it must have hurt her, disappointed her, that she who had fought for the country's freedom, spent so many years in jail and so on, but after that, I should have mentioned that she was also very much connected with the Youth Congress. And she had been to England, and she had represented the All India Women's Conference at the International Alliance of Women, where she met Hadindranath Chattopadhyay's brother, who was a revolutionary in there. And the other incident one should mention is also that in Bombay, somewhere in 1930s, when the national flag was being put up in Gwalior tank, there was a counter sort of people came, and there was people from the CPI who wanted to put up the communist flag. And Kamala Devi brushed them aside and herself took the national flag, the tricolour flag, and put it there, which was something that she got a great deal of publicity for. So Youth Congress was one thing. 1 year when Subhash Bose couldn't come, then Kamala Devi was asked to preside over the Youth Congress. The other thing that she did was she was very close to the socialist movement. She gradually moved to the left of the Congress, and she was close to Jayaprakash Narayan, Lohia, Acharya Narendra Dev, and all that group also. I think I'm sure I've exceeded my 15 minutes, so we'll stop now. After independence, she was critical of many things that the Congress did. She was not happy. And she turned her attention to other things about which I'm not going to speak because there are other people who are going to talk about it. One was her settlement of refugees, and then the Indian Cooperative Union, about which Gulshan is going to speak because she was associated with that. She founded many institutions like the Sangeet Natak Academy, the Indian National Theatre. She was part of the founding of the India International Center. And, she had many qualities which you require in a good leader. She was an institution builder, and she had vision, she had imagination, she had ability, and so on. Both in her personal life as well as in her public life, she broke many barriers. She was quite fearless and very deeply dedicated. But if we think of leadership as synonymous with power, then I don't think Kamala Devi was really interested in office or power, because she was, Kapila ji is here, and she was mentioning that day to me that when Kamala Devi was offered the president, to be the president of the, am I right, Kapila ji? And Kamala Devi said, what have I done to deserve this? I mean, deserve this means, sorry, what sins have I committed that you want me to be, to hold a position like this, She never wanted to hold any position. She was offered governorships, she was offered many things, but she did not want any office for herself. So she didn't really want power. And so in every institution, however, that she built, she played the role of catalyst, and given a challenge, she was always prepared to rise to the occasion and fight back. She served the cause of women, she served the cause of the freedom struggle, she served the cause of a revival of Indian handicrafts and textiles, of theatre, of Sangeet Natak Academy, and various other institutions. So thank you very much. I should stop now and give the floor to Gurupad, who is going to have a patua painting.
Thank you, Aparna ji. Now we have a storytelling by Patachitra artist Gurupada from West Bengal. Kamala Devi ki Janam Kahani. Gurupada was born in 1965 in Naya village, West Bengal. He is part of a community of Patuas from West Bengal. These scrolls are pictorial narratives of folklore. They are made of sewing together sheets of paper, usually backed with fabric and then painted with vegetable dyes mixed with vegetable gum. Though not formally trained, Gurupada learned how to paint from his family and community. He also composes the song which accompanies the stories and are sung frame by frame. Gurupada has been awarded State Award for the year 1993-94, Kalashri Award in 97 and National Award in 2004. Please welcome Gurupada.
Sunen সর্বজনে শুনেন দিয়ামন কমলা দেবীর জীবন কাহিনী করিব বর্ণন 13 এপ্রিল সেই যে 3 এপ্রিল মাস 1903 সালে ম্যাঙ্গালোরে গুণমণি এলেন মায়ের কোলে পড়া শোনাতে তিনি ছিলেন গুণমণি মা ঠাকুমার কাছে নয়নের মণি 14 বছর বয়সে বিয়ে হইল তার 2 বৎসরের মধ্যে কিন্তু স্বামী মারা যায় সমাজের গোড়ামি তিনি তুয়াক্কা করে মায়ের কথা মতো তিনি গেল মাদ্রাজে শহরে কুইন মেরিজ কলেজে পরিবার সময় তার সরোজিনী নাইডুর সঙ্গে আলাপ হইল তাহার সুহাসিনী কমলা দেবীকে বাড়ি নিয়ে গেল ভাই হারিনের সঙ্গে তাহা আলাপ করিয়ে দিল প্রতিভাবান হারিনেরও অনেক নাম তার অভিনেতা কবিতা লেখায় এবং ছিলেন নাট্যকার 20 বৎসর বয়সে হারিনের সঙ্গে বিয়ে হইল তার 1 বৎসর পরে কোলে আসিল কুমার 1943 সালে হিন্দি ছবি করে তানসেন ছবিতে নাম সারা ভারত জুড়ে বলে কানাডা চলচ্চিত্রে প্রথম অভিনয় তার মুচ্ছ কোটি ছবির নাম বহু প্রশংসা তার কমলা দেবী লন্ডন বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে ভর্তি হলেন তিনি সোশ্যাল ওয়ার্ক ডিপ্লোমা পাস তিনি করেন আপনি লন্ডনে গরিব মানুষের কাজ করিতে যান বহু বাধা সত্ত্বেও তিনি শাড়ি পরে যান 1925 সালে নারী আন্দোলনের নেত্রীর দেখা হলো মার্গারেট কুইলসন এর সঙ্গে আলাপ হইল সর্বভারতীয় নারী সম্মেলনে করেন সূত্রপাত কমলা দেবীকে সাথে নিয়ে করেন প্রতিবাদ সর্বপ্রথম কমলা দেবী নির্বাচনে প্রতিদ্বন্দ্বিতা করে মাদ্রাজ বিধানসভায় ভোটে 55 ভোটে হারে নারী সম্মেলনের সচিব হন তিনি কমলা দেবী ভাবেন তিনি ভাবেন আপনি 19 30 সালে তেরঙ্গা বাঁচাবার তরে তেরঙ্গা পতাকা জড়িয়ে ধরে নিজের শরীরে। স্বাধীনতার পরে কমলা দেবী চিন্তা ভাবনা করে গ্রামীণ কুটির শিল্পীরা বাঁচবে আজ, বাঁচবে কেমন করে। সেই দিল্লিতে প্রথম গড়েছিলেন ক্যাফ মিউজিয়াম নাম। কুটির শিল্পীরা শিল্পী দেখাবে, বাঁচাবে নিজেদের প্রাণ। কমলা দেবীকে আজকের সবাই চিনেন ভারতবাসী। কুটির শিল্পীদের সবার মুখে ফুটেছে কিন্তু হাসি। সেন্ট্রাল কোটেড ইন্ডাস্ট্রিজ শ্রেষ্ঠ অবদান। প্রতি বছর ভালো শিল্পীদের তারা জানায় সম্মান। সঙ্গীত নাটক একাডেমি গড়েছিলেন তিনি। ইউনেস্কোর সদস্য ছিলেন আপনি। পদ্মশ্রী পদ্মভূষণ পুরস্কার লাভ করেন তিনি। নানা প্রশংসার মধ্যে তিনি ছিলেন গুণমণি। 1988 সালে 27 অক্টোবর সবাইকে ছেড়ে তিনি হইলেন নিথর। নমস্কার।
Dhanyavad. Our next talk is on Kamla Devi's vision for handloom and handicrafts through the cooperative movement, and we have with us Srimati Gulshan Nandaji. Gulshan ji has worked for over 5 decades in marketing Indian handicrafts and textiles. She retired as the chairperson of Central Cottage Industries Emporium. Since 2000, she has worked on the research and advocacy activities of CRT. She was a member of the Planning Commission Steering Committee for Handloom and Handicrafts for the 12th 5-year plan and chairperson of the Working Group of Handicrafts. She has been awarded the Padma Shri by the Government of India for her services to the craft sector. She is also the senior most member of the Delhi Craft Council. Thank you, Gulshan ji.
Thank you. Good evening. What I am going to talk about today,
Mic, a little, take the mic a little nearer you.
where?
No, on the,
Better?
yeah, you see.
What I am going to talk about today may sound like a fairy tale. It is, however, the story of a beautiful lady with a soft voice, a sweet smile, and determination of steel. Yes, indeed, I am talking about Srimati Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay. In 1988, when Kamla Devi ji passed away, as a homage to her, the Crafts Council of India quite appropriately wrote, She belonged to a generation of greats who created history by dedicating their lives for the betterment of the nation without craving for personal glory or power. It continues, setting up the Cottage Industries Emporium and heading the All India Handicrafts setting up the Cottage Industries Emporium and heading the All India Handicrafts Board for years, Kamala Devi was indeed the grand dame of Indian handicrafts and folk art, her name being synonymous with craft. My association with her began in 1952 within the context of her efforts to bring livelihood and prestige to artisans and Indian handicrafts. In my talk today, I will recount the story of the birth of India's premier handicrafts enterprise, the Central Cottage Industries Emporium. I'll talk about my experience of working with Kamala Devi ji, as well as the many others who were part of this journey as we set up the cottage. Since the story began following India's partition, I've had to recall details from 6 decades ago, and for this I would like to acknowledge my colleague from that time, Mr. K.B. Johar, well, he's not here today, with whom I have had several discussions to create this talk. 1947, the year India attained independence, brought in its wake a division of the country, riots, massacres, and destruction of property. This turmoil led to the world's largest movement of population and took many years of work towards rehabilitation of its refugees. The Government of India set up a special Ministry of Rehabilitation for this purpose. At the time of partition, there were 565 small and large states which were integrated into our republic. Amongst the many consequences of this terrible debacle were also a loss of patronage to artists, craftspersons, and other professionals who thrived on the generosity of the erstwhile princely states of the country. Our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, was greatly perturbed by this and directed the Ministry of Commerce and Industry to start a retail outlet for the sale of products made by craftspeople, particularly those affected by the aftermath of independence. This retail outlet was the genesis of the Central Cottage Industries Emporium. In 1948, the Central Cottage Industries Emporium was opened on Queensway, now Janpath, New Delhi, in old army barracks. For 4 years, the ministry ran this outlet with a maximum sale of 2.50 lakhs. The government incurred a loss of 40 to 60 lakhs in 4 years for running this outlet. Simultaneously, the Indian Cooperative Union was set up in December 1948 under the leadership of Kamala Devi ji. Sri L.C. Jain, whose work Kamala Devi ji had seen in the Kingsway refugee camps, was chosen the General Secretary of the ICU. The women in the refugee camps were encouraged to take up stitching and embroidery to be able to earn an income. Sardar Patel, our then Home Minister, brought in truckloads of fabric on a regular basis from Gujarat for this purpose. The fabrics were separated for stitching or embroidery. Mrs. Rajesh Nandini and Mrs. Teji Veer Singh, who were working in the camps, helped in the endeavor. These embroidered goods were initially sold through Pandit Brothers and then later through the Refugee Handicrafts, a shop run by the Indian Cooperative Union on Barakamba Road in New Delhi. The success of the Refugee Handicrafts prompted Pandit Nehru to invite Kamala Devi ji to take over the management of the emporium. This made her very happy as craftspersons, weavers, and refugees could be helped at a national level by the ICU. With this, she started the craft movement in the country. On the 1st of November 1952, the Refugee Handicrafts shop merged with the Central Cottage Industries Emporium under the umbrella of the ICU. At the same time, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry set up the All India Handicrafts Board, also with Kamla Devi ji as chairperson, Shri L.C. Jain, Lakshmi to all of us as member secretary. The board was responsible for formulating policies and making guidelines for implementation in the handicraft sector. Having accepted the challenge, the ICU did everything in its power to strengthen the role of providing effective marketing support to artisans and weavers who had to be dissuaded from abandoning their trades. Assisting the ICU team were luminaries from different walks of life: Sri Srinivas Malaya, Srimati Kitty Shiva Rao, Sri M.L. Sudani, Sri P.N. Mathai, and Sri Dharampal, to name a few of them. Relentless activity started from this moment at all levels. A survey team led by Professor Raj Krishna traveled all over the country to study the problems of production and marketing of crafts. A detailed study was made of cooperatives, public and private marketing setups, foreign trade, quality control, design, research, training, and financial organization. Its report formed the policies and guidelines for the craft sector at the national level. The Emporium was given a dynamic, autonomous management to help place it on a sound footing. ICU invited people like Mrs. Fori Nehru, Mrs. Prem Berry, Mrs. Kitty Shiva Rao, Shri N.N. Datta, and Shri Bharat Sahai to participate in the venture. Mrs. Teji Veer Singh, who was associated first with the refugee camps as well as the refugee handicrafts shop, took over as the first manager of the cottage emporium. Mr. Cyrus Chapwala, a distinguished architect, was assigned the renovation of the emporium. Magically, he opened up seemingly cramped spaces, making an 8-counter sales corridor with a large room at the end into a vast open space housing all sorts of handicrafts and textiles. A group of would-be buyers led by Mrs. Teji Veer Singh traveled through the whole country in 1954. Their agenda was to acquaint themselves with artisans, placing orders for the emporium, assuring them of regular and continuous work, thus giving the craftspeople the much needed confidence and stability. Kamla Devi ji, as the Handicrafts Board chairperson, was also traveling extensively, walking from village to village with a handful of assistants. Well, Jasleen is one of them. She unearthed some of the most unusual things. It was during one such trip to a potter's hut in Bankura, West Bengal, she found a fascinating horse with the detachable ears, which was adopted as the logo for the cottage. Before long, cottage had brand new merchandise pouring in from all over the country, even some of the remotest areas, the likes of which Delhi had never laid eyes on before. Footfalls increased, so did the sales. From a mere 2.50 lakhs in 1952, they touched 80 lakhs in 1964. The emporium became a living museum which could be used as a ready reference for importers as well as exporters. Buyers were trained to procure the best merchandise, for which they visited producers at frequent intervals. They were also responsible for feedback to the producers on price, modifications, and improvements. They also helped the artisans with costing their items. They were also trained to assist producers in modifying their design towards saleable items. If an artisan brought an item that was not saleable, the buyers were expected to help them make items which were saleable. To enable this, we set up a planning and promotion department with leading designers. They were always at hand to suggest how best the skills of craftspeople could be used for making contemporary marketable items. The salary structure of the staff was geared towards cooperative principles, wherein the minimum salary was 100 and the maximum 500. Cottage was proud to be a fixed price shop. This gave customers confidence in the credibility of Cottage. In order to run Cottage on the same lines as big department stores in the USA, Mrs. Jane Liu was invited to reorganize the merchandise into departments. The source was represented by a subhead to enable sales staff as well as other staff to know where the item came from, with a tag on every item indicating the department, the source, the age of stocks, and the price. This was a feat in the 50s, as it was all manual. Today, computers can work wonders. Mr. Fosdick, a consultant from USA, was specially invited to impress upon us the relevance of market research and sound commercial practices. A special cell was created to analyze, collect data, and highlight the fast-selling items, as well as allocate resources for them in future planning. Except big producer groups who were paid within 15 to 30 days, the artisans were paid the same day. Certain percentage of the profit was kept aside for the welfare of such artisans, be it their medical needs or small advances to buy raw materials. This brought into our fold a large number of home-based workers. Meanwhile, a number of new features were added. Bankura, the cafe, was a great success. Rachna, the book and music store. Malika, the flower shop. Kunika, the art gallery and framing section, drew in a different set of customers. A ticket counter sold tickets for cultural shows. A gift wrapping department was set up with a staff member specially trained in Japan. A private order counter which catered to special customized orders through production center where tailors cooperatives also produce garments and accessories for the sales counter. In time, the place was buzzing. Our advertisements created by Mr. Som Bedigal with ingenuity were a great draw. The display was changed constantly for exhibitions or new arrivals. Mrs. Ratna Fabri and later Mrs. Sina Kaul, with a team of young display artists, created the most amazing ambience. One almost felt like buying a whole window instead of just one or two of the displays. By this time, thousands of showrooms began to spring up all over the country on routes to monuments, near hotels, etc., stocking handicrafts. This fulfilled the purpose of popularizing crafts and making the handmade crafts commercially viable. Every VIP who visited Delhi was brought to the cottage, generally on their way back from Rajghat, to give them exposure to our heritage under one roof. That was the kind of status enjoyed by cottage. The visits of some of these were events that would be remembered always. The Queen's visit, the visit of Jackie Kennedy, and that of the Shah and Shah Banu of Iran. Ahead of the visit of the Queen, one day Pandit Nehru walked into the Emporium on his way back from Bal Bhavan. He just walked in much earlier than the opening time, and one of our sales assistants, Jaya, was cleaning dusting the brass. So Panditji walked in and he said, "Dukan khul gaya?" She, without turning around, she says, "Abhi khula nahi." She was a Bengali, so "Abhi khula nahi," she said. And then suddenly she recognized the voice and she didn't know what to do because by then he had reached the other end of the hall. He used to walk so fast. And he just wanted to see what the preparation was like ahead of the visit of the Queen. So Lakshmi came to me and he said, get some roses for him very quickly. So, I ran to the flower shop and picked up the first bunch of roses, which was mixed colors, and gave them to Panditji on his way out of the emporium. So as soon as he had left, Lakshmi called me. He says, don't you know he likes red roses? I said, well, if I had started selecting red roses, Panditji would have reached Teen Murti by then. Because he rarely, you all know, he used to walk so fast. When the Queen of England visited Cottage, she bought from us a reversible dupion silk coat, which she liked very much, and it somehow fitted her beautifully. So the same night she wore it to the President's banquet, which is something that is not usually done. Her wardrobe is fixed. But in this case, she made an exception to it. The next day, we were front page news because the Queen had changed her wardrobe and worn something that she picked up at the Cottage Industries Emporium. Well, that made us all very happy. Kamla Devi ji did not visit the Emporium regularly. Her special brand of leadership was in selecting a team of dedicated enthusiasts, as I'd like to call them. They followed her dreams and her cause to the minutest possible detail. I would like to read here a quote from Anjali Ila Menon from a recently published book, Delhi, the First City. I read, Panditji and his young daughter Indira were closely watched by Delhiites in a matter of style, both sartorial and otherwise. Fortunately for Delhi and incidentally for India, there was a small band of dedicated women who took it upon themselves to preserve and develop handicrafts and the handloom industry without any remuneration. Among them were Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, Shona Ray, Kitty Shivarao, Fori Nehru, and the indefatigable Prem Berry, who ran the Cottage Industries Emporium for several decades. Cottage, as it was affectionately called, was not just a place to shop and hang out in, but became the arbiter of good taste and certainly dictated the lifestyle flavor of the times. Kamla Devi ji's passion for handicrafts influenced the elite society ladies wearing French chiffons into purchasing Kanjivarams and Banaras saris, which they wore with great pride. The interiors of homes suddenly changed from chandeliers and crystals to bronzes, stone carvings, and antique wooden art objects. Her everlasting legacy has been to change the mindset of the customers, thus ensuring the permanent place for handmade products. This gave the artisans confidence, dignity, and pride. Today, this sector ranks second only to agriculture in India's economy in terms of employing the number of people. Kamla Devi ji also gave the same sense of importance to musicians, dancers, classical and folk singers who suddenly were elevated to the stature of artists. They performed for the general public who learned to appreciate their art. This appreciation thus went beyond the guests of princes and nawabs. In 1964, at the peak of its glory, the Central Cottage Industries Emporium was handed back to the government. The Indian Cooperative Union had fulfilled Kamla Devi ji's dream. Thank you.
Would anybody would like to ask any questions or has any comments?
Everybody wants to go, I think.
Thank you so much, Gulshan ji and Aparna ji. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gurupada. Thank you.
Thank
You, everybody, for taking out time and coming here. Thank you.
Thank you for being such a good compare.